Welcome back. Today we're exploring a chilling case that shook the quiet community of Keller, Texas in 2011, a place where families trust their neighbors and rarely lock their doors before dusk. On an early autumn morning, a single gunshot rips through the fabric of a peaceful suburban home. Moments later, police officers respond to a frantic 911 call from a distraught woman who claims that an intruder has just murdered her husband and attacked her. It is the kind of call that no dispatcher wants to receive, and for officers arriving at the two-story brick facade residence framed by a well-tended lawn and a driveway holding a sleek sedan, the scene appears straightforward at first. A violent home invasion, a family torn apart, and a single survivor left trembling in the aftermath. As authorities push open the wooden front door, the smell of gunpowder still lingers faintly in the air. Inside, they find the body of Greg Williams, a well-liked father and professional, lying on the floor of his master bedroom. His wife, Michele, is taken outside, sobbing, eyes wide with shock, a bruise forming on her cheek. She gestures toward the shadows, as if expecting the masked intruder to re-emerge at any moment. The officers do their best to console her and simultaneously secure the scene. They radio for detectives, medical examiners, and crime scene technicians to piece together the puzzle. Greg's life is over and Michele's is changed forever, or so it would seem. Yet as the hours turn to days, subtle contradictions in Michele's account begin to surface. At first, it might be chalked up to trauma, the shock of witnessing such brutality. But soon, the shifting timeline, the discrepancies in physical evidence, and the inconsistencies in Michele's demeanor prod the investigators forward. Was this truly a random break-in on a mild Texas night, or is the real killer standing right there, hiding behind tears, whispers, and the facade of a bereaved wife? This episode of the Red Carpet Event Junkies podcast is a reminder that no two stories are the same, and the only way to join the fight is to risk it. What follows will capture the attention of an entire nation, culminating in a sensational trial and a Dateline episode. The deeper the police dig, the more unsettling the truth becomes. The neighborhood will never look the same, and neither will anyone who knew Michele and Greg Williams. Michele Williams is in her early 40s at the time of the crime, of medium height, perhaps 5'5", with a lean frame that speaks of careful dietary habits and a keen interest in projecting a polished appearance. Her blonde hair is meticulously highlighted and falls in layers around a face that could be described as pretty yet unassuming. Eyes a soft hazel, a pleasant but not overly warm smile, and skin that shows a devotion to sunscreen and careful grooming. Neighbors remember her as always well-dressed, favoring designer jeans and fitted tops, her wardrobe hinting at a woman who takes pride in the impression she makes. Raised in a working-class family on the outskirts of Dallas, Michele's early years are marked by domestic instability. There are whispers that her father struggled with alcohol, and that arguments behind closed doors shaped her understanding of love and power. Though no formal record of severe childhood trauma is on file, friends from her youth recall a girl who often seemed guarded, her emotions carefully contained, as though she'd learned early on that trust could be easily betrayed. Academically, Michele was a decent student, neither top of the class nor failing, who pursued a practical degree in business administration from a local community college. In her 20s, she drifted through a series of administrative roles, never quite settling into a long-term career. Her professional path was not remarkable, but stable enough to support herself. Personality-wise, Michele is remembered as charming in company, adept at small talk, and pleasant at social gatherings. Yet those who know her more intimately describe a controlling side, someone who needs to orchestrate her environment down to the smallest detail. She's not often seen losing her temper publicly, but there is tension behind the scenes. A former boyfriend who prefers anonymity later recalls jealous streaks, sudden mood swings, and tearful accusations over imagined infidelities. Michele's mental health has never been formally assessed, but some suspect underlying issues with anxiety or paranoia, especially as she edges into her 40s. By the time she meets Greg Williams, She has been married once before. That union ended amicably on paper, but left behind lingering rumors of fights over money and fidelity. In Keller's social circles, Michele is a figure who manages to appear both enmeshed and detached. She attends community events, volunteers at a local fundraiser once in a while, but always seems to do so more to maintain appearances than from genuine interest. Financially, the couple is comfortable, thanks largely to Greg's career. Michele appears to have few money worries, spending freely on clothes, cosmetic treatments, and home decor. She enjoys yoga sessions, browsing boutique shops, and hosting small dinner parties where, according to neighbors, she keeps a careful watch on every detail, snapping at Greg if he deviates from the script. Early warning signs of trouble, quiet manipulations, a subtle push for dominance and private arguments, begin to stack up, though almost no one outside their home fully appreciates their significance. By contrast, Greg Williams is a well-respected figure in his mid-40s, a broad-shouldered man with a warm, genuine smile and friendly gray-blue eyes. He stands about 5'10", with a bit of a soft middle-aged spread, and is known to wear collared shirts to work and relaxed polos on weekends. Greg, raised in a stable middle-class family, graduated from a reputable Texas university with a degree in finance. Professionally, he carved out a solid career in a reputable local firm, earning enough to provide a comfortable suburban life. He is the type of man who coaches a daughter's soccer team, helps neighbors fix a broken fence, and takes pride in his tidy lawn. Greg's relationship with Michele is, at least in public, affectionate. He's a father. Together they have a blended family, and he cherishes the time spent with kids, planning vacations to Disney World or weekend camping trips near a lake. Family photos show him beaming beside Michele and the children. Unlike Michele, Greg is not particularly concerned with appearances, beyond being respectful and presentable. He's well liked at work, considered for managerial promotions, and some colleagues speak of him as a mentor. He dreams of a stable future, maybe an early retirement, where he and Michele can travel. In the weeks before his death, he seems content, though close friends notice he's been somewhat more reserved, hinting at tension at home that he never fully articulates. On the last day of his life, Greg follows his usual routine, waking early, brewing coffee, reading the financial news on his iPad. His day is predictable, just how he likes it. No one imagines that by nightfall he will lie lifeless on the bedroom floor, victim to a violent act that makes no sense to those who knew him. He has few enemies, and no one can fathom how a random intruder would choose his house. If he harbors any secret doubts about Michele, he does not share them openly. His future plans revolve around family and security. Those close to him call him a family man, always ready with a supportive word or a helping hand. It is 2011, and Keller, Texas is a suburban haven about half an hour's drive from the hustle and bustle of Dallas-Fort Worth. It's a town that prides itself on good schools, well-manicured parks, and a low crime rate. Families choose it for its safety, hoping to create stable memories away from the frenetic pace of larger cities. The local economy is robust enough, with new developments cropping up and property values steadily climbing. The residents have grown accustomed to a tranquil environment. Around this time, the national mood is one of cautious optimism. The economy is recovering from the recession. Families are once more planning road trips and small luxuries. Crime in Keller is rare, more often involving petty theft than violent acts. The night of the murder is mild, with a slight October chill in the air. The sky is clear, stars visible above the streetlights that dot the quiet cul-de-sacs. Wind chimes tinkle softly on front porches, and the faint smell of backyard barbecues still lingers. The Williams home is in a neat subdivision with houses spaced just far enough to afford a sense of privacy, but close enough that one could hear a neighbor's raised voice. And so, when settled on a mat in the front yard after a chat, a playground sits 2 streets down, where children laugh on weekends. The local grocery store is a short drive away, and there is a beloved diner serving classic breakfasts that the Williams family sometimes frequents. In this gentle setting, Greg and Michele's home, red brick, a trimmed hedge, a small flower bed, is a model of suburban comfort. The master bedroom, where tragedy will unfold, overlooks the backyard, a place Greg once hoped to renovate with a small garden and a stone path. There's an unsettling contrast between the serenity of the setting and the violent act that will soon tear through its core. Before the crime, the community is happy, crime practically an afterthought. Neighbors know each other, at least by sight, and there's a casual friendliness that permeates daily life. It's not unusual to find people chatting at the mailbox or recommending handymen and babysitters. Police patrols are routine, more focused on traffic violations than homicides. That sense of ease will be forever changed when Michele calls 911. The first time Michele and Greg meet is at a local charity function sometime in the early 2000s. Greg, recently divorced, is drawn to Michele's poised demeanor. They exchange pleasant banter over plates of hors d'oeuvres, discovering a shared appreciation for Texas cuisine and a mutual interest in maintaining a stable home environment. Initially, Michele presents herself as down-to-earth yet slightly mysterious, an attractive combination for Greg, who is eager for a fresh start. Their first dates are conventional dinners at mid-range restaurants, walks in the local park, and Greg feels comfortable with her. Michele appears supportive, attentive, and eager to settle into a nice, normal life. Over time, their relationship deepens, and Greg introduces Michele to his family. They find her charming enough, nothing extraordinary, but pleasant and polite. Michele, in turn, keeps Greg slightly at arm's length, sharing only what she feels he needs to know. Friends notice that as the relationship progresses, Michele seems to exert a subtle control. She chooses where they go, which friends they socialize with, what kind of furniture to buy. Greg, easygoing by nature, doesn't seem to mind. He enjoys the stability he perceives in Michele, a woman who knows what she wants. The wedding, which takes place a few years before the murder, is tasteful. A small ceremony, attended by family and close friends. Photographs show them smiling, bathed in warm afternoon light, two people who appear well matched. Yet over the years, cracks form. Michele begins to dictate household finances despite Greg being the primary breadwinner. She is uncomfortable with his friendships, often complaining they demand too much of his time. Behind closed doors, arguments flare up, and Greg's once contented demeanor shifts into hesitant compliance. Family members recall awkward dinner parties where Michele would lightly chide Greg for small missteps, and he would laugh it off, but there was tension in his eyes. Some friends try to talk to Greg about this dynamic, but he waves them off, insisting it's just Michele's personality. Others warn him that her controlling behavior is a red flag, that he should establish boundaries. He never seems to do so. As the relationship matures, Michele's need for control grows more pronounced. She checks Greg's text messages, under the guise of organization, comments on his attire, and criticizes the time he spends with his children from previous relationships. He tries to appease her, making small concessions, always hoping for harmony. But her demands grow, and her mood darkens if she doesn't get what she wants. Friends later say they saw the writing on the wall. Greg was losing himself in this marriage, becoming quieter, more withdrawn. In the months leading up to the murder, whispers of unhappiness circulate among their social circle. Some suggest Greg considered leaving her. Others mention Michele's obsession with their finances, how she feared losing status or facing financial instability if Greg left. There might have been secret meetings with divorce attorneys, or confidential calls with a friend confiding doubts. The precise details remain blurry, but what's clear is that the tension between them is escalating, and everyone around them seems powerless to intervene. It's unclear what finally triggers the crisis that leads to Greg's death. Perhaps a discussion of money, a life insurance policy worth a substantial sum that Michele might have had her eye on, or maybe Greg's threat to leave, which would strip her of the comfortable suburban life. By late summer and into early fall 2011, Michele's behavior becomes more erratic. She grows paranoid, checking window locks repeatedly, snapping at Greg for perceived slights. They have heated arguments behind closed doors, and Greg, normally calm, raises his voice on at least one occasion. A neighbor hears muffled shouting through the walls late at night, followed by silence. Greg considers counseling, mentioning it to a close friend one afternoon in September. He thinks that maybe a professional can help them communicate better. The friend, relieved that Greg acknowledges the problem, encourages this step. But it never happens. Michele balks at the suggestion, calling it unnecessary and a waste of money. Instead, the tension simmers, each minor disagreement building upon the last. By early October, Greg's coworkers sense something is off. He's distracted, less focused on projects he once found absorbing. He receives a few cryptic texts during the workday and steps away from his desk to answer, emerging each time more unsettled. Signs that something terrible might occur loom like dark clouds. Michele grows more secretive, deleting emails, locking her phone, and making cryptic comments to acquaintances about needing to start over. She visits a local firing range under the guise of learning self-defense, a detail that will later send chills down investigators' spines. Friends approach Greg, urging him to address the issues head-on, or leave if things are too unhealthy. But Greg, ever hopeful, delays action. He wants to give Michele a chance to calm down, to return to the woman he first met at that charity function. All the while, Michele's internal storm intensifies. She fears losing everything: her status, her home, her financial security. In her mind, something must give. That deadly combination of fear, control, and despair builds a pressure cooker scenario with no vent. Without direct intervention, without professional help, without Greg taking a firm stand, the stage is set for a catastrophic release. On the night of the murder, let's set the stage precisely. October 13, 2011, at around 2 a.m., the temperature hovers near a comfortable 60 degrees, a soft breeze drifting through half-open bedroom windows. Michele has decided that this night will mark a grim turning point. She has run through several scenarios in her mind, perhaps uncertain until the last minute which one she will choose. Sometime after midnight, after a final heated exchange, Greg drifts into a restless sleep. Michele, tense and awake, listens to his breathing and contemplates what must be done. Shortly before the fateful shot, she stages the scene. There is a firearm in the home, legally owned, that Greg keeps locked. Michele manages to gain access. Experts will later say the shot rings out at around 2:30 a.m. The sound is sharp and hollow in the quiet night. Moments later, a panicked 911 call crackles into the dispatcher's headphones. Michele claims an intruder broke in, assaulted her, and murdered her husband. She tries to sound hysterical, but there's something off about her tone, practiced panic rather than raw terror. Police arrive quickly. They find Greg's body on the bedroom floor, a bullet wound to his head. There's a disarray that doesn't quite fit the story of a random break-in. Michele's injuries are superficial, a small bruise that could easily be self-inflicted. She insists she saw a masked man run off into the darkness. Officers sweep the area with flashlights, but no footprints match her story. Neighbors saw nothing and heard only the gunshot. The initial evidence, the shell casings, the trajectory of the bullet, the lack of forced entry, begins to paint a portrait of something much more intimate and personal. In those first hours, Michele plays the grieving widow, wrapping herself in a blanket on the front lawn as paramedics and detectives maneuver around her. But investigators notice details that don't add up. For instance, the supposed struggle with the intruder should have left more signs of disruption. The timeline Michele provides is inconsistent. She seems unsure whether she woke before the shot or after it. And where are the valuables that would have been stolen in a home invasion? A crime scene technician remarks on the odd neatness of the master bathroom, where Michele claims she fled in terror. An officer notes that Michele's story changes slightly with each retelling, small discrepancies that, while not conclusive on their own, begin to erode her credibility. By dawn, as the morning light reveals a typical suburban street unnaturally disrupted by yellow police tape, Michele's status shifts silently in the minds of detectives from victim to potential suspect. The investigation unfolds methodically. Keller's police force, though not often tested by homicide, calls in experienced detectives from nearby Fort Worth for additional support. They interview Michele multiple times, comparing each version of her account. She begins to contradict herself, first claiming she never touched the gun that night, then admitting she might have moved it after the struggle. The forensics team recovers traces of gunshot residue on her clothing. The angle of the bullet wound suggests the shooter stood close, much closer than an intruder darting through the room would have dared. The supposed point of entry, a window left ajar, shows no signs of being forced. Witness interviews are key. Neighbors report no suspicious sounds other than the single gunshot. No one saw a stranger lurking in the shadows. Greg's best friend tells detectives that Greg recently confided marital strife, that he might leave Michele soon. Another friend mentions Michele's recent obsession with their life insurance policy and how she insisted Greg increase the coverage. Investigators subpoena phone records, uncovering calls and texts that portray Michele as fearful of losing financial stability. A search warrant on the home's computers reveals online research into homicide investigations, self-defense pleas, and the legal aftermath of spousal death. After his burial in Spain, Michele finally began to retire. Ballistics experts confirm that the bullet came from the Williams' own gun. Crime scene reconstruction specialists show that the pattern of blood spatter is inconsistent with Michele's story. Experts in domestic homicide are consulted, explaining how spouses sometimes stage break-ins to cover up murder. All these findings converge like pieces of an elaborate puzzle, each fitting neatly to reveal a picture of cold calculation. By late October 2011, detectives have enough evidence to seek Michele's arrest. She is taken into custody without incident, just after dusk, at a relative's house where she claims she was seeking comfort. The charges: murder. There's a media flurry as the community struggles to accept that the seemingly calm, well-groomed suburban wife might be capable of shooting her husband in the dead of night, then faking a break-in. News vans park outside the police station, reporters calling out questions as Michele, head down, is escorted in handcuffs. Her attorneys move quickly to shape a narrative of innocence, trauma, and confusion, but the weight of the evidence seems crushing. Legal proceedings begin in earnest as the state charges Michele Williams with the murder of Greg Williams. She appears in court for the first time in November 2011 wearing a modest blouse and slacks, hair pulled back, face downcast. The prosecution lays out a methodical case. The inconsistencies in her account, the forensic evidence, the life insurance motive, and the psychological profile of a controlling spouse who viewed homicide as a solution to a failing marriage. Defense attorneys counter with claims of Michele's trauma, her supposed inability to remember details clearly due to shock. They argue that a real intruder might have slipped away unseen, that the police rushed to judgment. Expert witnesses for the prosecution dissect the trajectory of the bullet and the nature of spousal homicides. Friends and family members testify, some tearfully, about Greg's good character and Michele's controlling personality. The defense tries to poke holes in the timeline, suggesting that the police failed to consider alternative suspects thoroughly. Court proceedings last several weeks, with each day bringing new revelations that keep the public riveted. Media coverage is relentless, and a Dateline crew takes up residence in the area, interviewing neighbors and experts. When the verdict comes down, Michele is found guilty of murdering Greg. The sentencing is harsh enough to ensure she will spend a significant portion of her life behind bars. Appeals are attempted, but none bear fruit. As the courtroom empties, the community feels a heavy sense of closure, tinged with sorrow. There was no happy ending, just the confirmation of a grim truth. In the aftermath, Greg's family tries to move on, but the absence of their loved one is a constant ache. They establish a small scholarship fund in his name, remembering him as a kind-hearted man who deserved better. Keller's community responds by reassessing its sense of safety. Though still a low-crime town, security systems see a spike in sales. Neighbors talk more openly about domestic violence, recognizing its subtle forms and the importance of early intervention. The local police hold seminars on warning signs, urging residents to trust their instincts when they sense something amiss in a relationship. One of President Joe's first pieces of law. Media coverage lingers, with true crime segments and podcasts dissecting Michele's psychology. What drove a suburban wife to commit such a heinous act? Long-term, this case prompts local civic groups to push for better resources for troubled marriages, mental health screenings, and domestic violence shelters. Some legislators cite the case while discussing tougher penalties for spousal murder or better funding for intervention programs. Years later, when the headlines have faded, the memory lingers on, a cautionary tale told over coffee at the diner or whispered after a PTA meeting. It stands as a reminder that even in the most placid corners of suburbia, darkness can lurk behind picture-perfect facades. The Williams home, once so inviting, is sold off and renovated. New owners move in, unaware of the tragedy that unfolded there, except for the occasional question from curious neighbors. The legacy of Michele and Greg Williams remains a permanent footnote in Keller's collective memory. This case illustrates the devastating consequences of unchecked emotional turmoil, the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships, and the need for supportive community networks that can intervene before violence erupts. As we reflect on this story, let's remember that behind every headline lies a human tragedy that could have been prevented, and the sustaining of mutual trust may support mental health and spiritual growth that could have been prevented. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. If this tale of deception and tragedy resonates, consider watching our coverage of other domestic homicide cases. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on the early warning signs and what society can do to prevent similar tragedies. How do we recognize the quiet storms brewing behind closed doors, and how can we ensure that intervention comes before it's too late?